Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Minnesota heading on the road to play Michigan. Michigan obviously coming off a massive win against USC where they were able to run the football. And I think the most concerning part of this matchup for the Minnesota fans is you're looking at a Minnesota defense that just gave up 270 rushing yards to Iowa on Saturday. Like, if you're Michigan, you want the game to look like it did in the first half against USC, where you're running the football, staying on the field, keeping your defense fresh. Now, it kind of got away from Michigan in the second half, but that first half, like, Michigan can win a lot of football games with that kind of play style. And although this Michigan offense is quite frankly one-dimensional, you got to get creative in terms of how you want to run the football. Want to dive into that, talk about what Minnesota brings to the table. Now, before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. One, these game prediction preview episodes, they've been a blast for the boys, and all the support y'all have shown us. It absolutely means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comments section. That is the best part about doing this. And Dill, without further ado, let's start with this Michigan offense. And I want to dive into, this idea that, hey, Michigan's going to run the football. What, Alex Orji threw 12 passes all game against USC on Saturday afternoon. From a creativity standpoint, what are some concepts you want to see Michigan kind of utilize and go to in this football game here?
I mean, I think it really starts with being very diligent and consistent about attacking the boundary to an extent. And it's not just with the quick screens. I feel like that's what Michigan's been going to kind of answer that question. But I think their rushing attack needs to at least threaten that, whether it's with Alex Orji running as they did a little bit in the first half, whether that's with tosses and some of those other outside concepts. They need to do that a little bit because they need to get linebackers flowing or at least moving a little bit side to side. Because when you saw that second half, when Michigan frankly went away from some of that stuff, you really saw those linebackers attacking really hard downhill. You saw the defensive ends attacking really hard into the middle. And that's where I think it can get really bogged down, if you will, for Michigan. So somehow they need to be really diligent, really intentional, if you will, about attacking the perimeter with their run game to at least give that part of it a threat to open up.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the play where we went the end around to Freddie Moore that went for 15 yards. And then you kind of go back to the concept, but you don't actually give it to Freddie Moore. But you're getting linebackers sprinting outside. You're kind of loosening up between the tackles in terms of getting downhill with that run game. I'd like to see some, I guess, creativity in terms of personnel. Like, we kind of talked a lot about Alex Orji taking over at the quarterback spot, Kalal Mullings, potentially Donovan Edwards on the field at the same time, and kind of getting creative with your personnel where you look at where are the best players on this Michigan offense, especially with Colston Loveland banged up right now. It's with your running backs. You want to get as many of those guys on the field at the same
It
time.
stuns me that we haven't seen any sort of triple option type looks. Because again, if you're going to be as one dimensional and you're not going to at least threaten to throw the ball at all, you need to do something to, again, keep defenses honest and open something up. I'm really surprised they haven't gone to anything kind of really outside the box creative like the military academies, frankly, doing.
Yeah, and I wonder if it has a little bit more to do, and this is kind of like the optimistic Michigan fan in me thinking about this. Look, Alex Orji was just named quarterback on Monday? And I know that I think Michigan had an idea that Alex Orji could have been the starter throughout fall camp and spring practice, but I think you're going to see a bigger and bigger package in terms of how they're going to run the football as Alex Orji continues to run this offense, as they continue to kind of get some of those concepts installed. And so, again, I think it comes down to you just want to give the opposing defense, look, if you can't throw the football that much, you got to give a lot of different looks in the run game. You got to have a lot of different concepts, pre-snap motion. That's what I'm kind of looking for. Because, again, you go back to the first half, Michigan was doing that at a high level and having a lot of success. That is exactly how we want a football game to look like if you're a Michigan fan. And then in the second half, a lot less creativity. I think that had a large portion with we just couldn't stay on the field. We ran, 9 plays in the third quarter. So it's hard to get mad at the play calling when they only got to call 9 plays. That being said,
That's always a chicken and or the egg problem.
Yeah, it seemed like we did just lose a little creativity, 100%. Dill, what about the passing attack? Like, the 7-12 for 32 yards. It was pretty much just screens. We very rarely had Alex Orji drop back and process. The one thing I'd like to see that I'm surprised Michigan really didn't go to at all was maybe 1 or 2 shots attacking the deeper third. Like, when you have safeties playing as downhill as USC was, is there a play that you can dial up where you're just giving Michigan the opportunity to potentially hit an explosive play that can change a game? Because we didn't really see that, and we kind of assumed we probably would see that at least once or twice in this football game.
Yeah, and I don't even know what to think about the Michigan passing attack at this point. I mean, if that's just what they're going to do and everything's going to be underneath and they're just going to try to run it pretty much every time, that's, again, I don't know. Can you beat teams like Minnesota doing that? I think probably you can because the defense is good enough and the talent or your running back play is probably good enough as well. But again, I'd really like to see them try to do something. I don't think you can be that one dimensional. I
Yeah,
like,
and
yeah, you can get creative in the run game, but there's a limit to that at some point. You're probably right. They're going to need to be able to show something that isn't just like a one read rollout off a bootleg, if
yeah,
you will, to try to get to the tight
yeah,
end.
yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And again, I think maybe as Alex Orji continues to get more reps, you might see a little bit more of it. Looking at this Minnesota defense, again, I think the concerning stat line if you're a Minnesota fan is we just gave up 270 rushing yards to Iowa, which had a very similar box score to what Michigan just had with USC, where Cade McNamara went 10 of 18 for 59 yards. So he just outpassed Alex Orji, but certainly not by much. The secondary has been pretty damn solid, like 4.5 yards per pass attempts, number 7 in the country. They have a very good pass rush. Just unfortunately for Minnesota fans, I don't know how much it matters because I don't think Michigan is going to be throwing the football all that often.
Well, I think their big issue is I don't think they're very deep in the middle. I mean, you look at their defensive tackles; those two, Logan Redden, and Devin Easter were pretty much on the field all the time. And
Yeah.
Logan Redding's a really, really good player, so I don't want to take anything away from him. But aside from him, I didn't think Devin Easter had a great game. Again, Iowa was able to run the ball pretty consistently. They are moving guys. They are getting up to linebackers and creating big creases, which obviously is pretty much the only hope Michigan has to move the ball. At least it looks like right now, given what we saw from that USC game. So they're going to need to try to find something to do to keep their linebackers a little bit more clean, get Michigan's guy or keep Michigan's offensive linemen from working up because that was, it felt like to me, a huge issue against Iowa, who I don't think has a great offensive line by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and I think you talk about again, what's the goal for Michigan? Like grind down defenses, like win football games, like we won them in 2023. And if Minnesota's thin at the defensive line, like you want to stay on the field, make them tackle a lot. The last thing I'll kind of say on the Michigan offense here, I think Kalel Mullings and Sherrone Moore even said it in the post game. Like Kalel Mullings has kind of earned that running back one spot. It's been something that, quite frankly, I've been passionate about pretty much all offseason long. Where look, Don Edwards, I love him. Like as a Michigan fan, he's come up with some massive plays for the boys over the last couple of years. But on a down-to-down basis, especially with this Michigan offense, where it's imperative that we stay on schedule because, for lack of better terms, we're cooked if it's 3rd and 8+. You got to have a running back that can keep you on schedule. Kalel Mullings has done that at a much more significant level. They've both had 50 carries on the season. Donovan Edwards averaging 4.5. Kalel Mullings averaging 8 yards per carry. Kalel Mullings 5.3 yards after contact per carry to Donovan Edwards' 2.6. Kalel Mullings 17 missed tackles forced to Donovan Edwards' 5. I think Kalel Mullings has been the better back, and especially with how you want this Michigan offense to look, which is bully ball, which is to wear teams down. I think Kalel Mullings, in terms of how he attacks the line of scrimmage, needs to be the guy. So you're talking about how the rushing distribution should look. I think you're going to start seeing it kind of heavily lean towards Kalel Mullings, who, in fairness to Kalel as well, he can hit some explosive plays like we saw on the Saturday afternoon against USC. This Minnesota offense still kind of a non-prototypical PJ Fleck offense. Now I'm looking at the numbers. They're running the football only 48% of their snaps. That's 97th in the country. Minnesota is normally around 60%, top 20 in the country. Max Brosmer has flashed at times, but I don't think he's a quarterback that you can lean on and have you win a ton of football games in the Big Ten. I think the biggest concern for Minnesota on offense is, look, this is a team that recruits and wants to run the football. Like that's how they build this program. They're averaging 4.1 yards per carry. That's 73rd in the country. If they can't get the ground game going against Michigan, it's hard to see Max Brosmer dropping back and dicing Michigan secondary up in this football game here.
And the real issue is that's with two very good backs, in my opinion. I think Major and Taylor have both played really, really good football. So, again, you look at that offensive line, that needs to be a really strong unit for Minnesota. Given who they've played, they should have a much better rushing attack, frankly, than that. Like, you look at what UNC is, they should have been able to run the ball, I think, very, very consistently. It was obviously very difficult for them in that game to run it. So you kind of look, I mean, if that offensive line's not up to par, and it really hasn't been yet this year, and they've struggled at times in pass protection, especially at
Yeah.
those tackle spots, that's going to be a problem because Michigan, you look at there's one thing you don't have a single question about. It's Michigan's defensive lines right up there with anyone in the country. So that's, you look at that matchup, that's going to be a huge issue if their offensive line doesn't have a really, really good day.
Yeah, specifically in the tackles. Like Quinn Carroll struggled, and you look at Michigan, like how they won that football game Saturday afternoon. I would say the player of the game was Josiah Stewart coming off the edge. Though, quite frankly, Derek Moore is really good too. Both of them last week, 31% pass rush win rate for the both of them. Josiah Stewart, 3 quarterback carries, 3 quarterback hits, 2 sacks. Some next level stuff. Michigan's defensive line's elite, but I feel like all the conversation is the best interior defensive line duo in the country, which I ain't gonna argue about. But you look at this edge rusher duo with Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart and guys like TJ Guy stepping up, Rayshon Benny stepped up on the inside. This Michigan defensive line is ferocious. If Minnesota can run the football and stay on schedule, and they have to rely on Max Brosmer dropping back and this offensive line holding up in pass protection, it's going to be a problem.
That's the thing. I mean, Brosmer looked pretty good in that first half against Iowa when they were able to keep things kind of steady and rolling. They weren't getting behind the chains a whole lot.
Yeah.
He can kind of make things happen for them. But again, their rushing attack just hasn't been consistent enough for that football team. And he's not probably that guy who you can trust to drop back on like 60, 70% of the time and just make it happen working down the field that way. So again, you're kind of right. At the end of the day, Minnesota doesn't have the weapons on the edge. You'll have Daniel Jackson. He's a really, really good player. But aside from him, you don't really fear that much about what Minnesota's got on the edge. In Brosmer, again, he's really more of a complement piece who I think can be really pretty effective if they can run the ball. It's just like you look at this matchup with Michigan, I'm not really 100% sure how.
Yeah, and I think one of the big storylines, I think Wink Martindale's getting a little bit more comfortable with the defensive personnel. As a Michigan fan, like a little frustrated with how blitz happy it was. And look, I know Wink Martindale's been a really good defensive coordinator, and he's been a really good defensive coordinator because he's been a guy that blitzes. You don't really need to blitz with this Michigan front four. And so I think Wink Martindale kind of figured that out against USC. Like, hey, we're going to rush 4, drop 7, sometimes rush 3, drop 8. We know we can impact the quarterback with our front four. We don't need to blitz as much. We can play a little bit more coverage and get the same impact on the quarterback. I think it was Wink Martindale kind of meshes with this defensive personnel, and they kind of understand, hey, what do we do really well? What do we not do so well? I think it only gets better. It was obviously a very good performance against USC, specifically in that first half. Dill, let's get to the pick here. 12.5-point favorites for Michigan at home against Minnesota. That's 2-2 coming into this one. Are you taking Michigan to cover the 12 points against Minnesota here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they've shown enough from the offensive side of the ball to do it. Now, do I think they'll kind of control this game and it'll pretty much feel in hand the whole time? Yeah, I probably do think that because I don't see really Minnesota getting a ton going on the offense side of the ball. But covering 12 and a half points or so, it's kind of a lot if you're going to be as ineffective as Michigan's been at times for kind of long stretches of a game on the offense side of the ball. I mean, I think Minnesota is a respectable league. They have some real playmakers on defense who I think can have their moments of knocking Michigan off schedule, especially those defensive ends. I mean, Joyner and Strigow can really, really play. They make negative plays. And that's a good recipe, I think, to control Michigan's offense to an extent. So again, do I think that it's going to be a nail biter necessarily? No, but I think it's like I could see something like 20-10 or something pretty easily.
I waited for you to finish. Horrible analysis. I'm taking Michigan in the points. Iowa just scored 31 points against Minnesota. Like, I would like to think that Michigan can get it going on offense a little bit. More importantly, like, I think this Michigan offense is going to continue to get better as Alex Orji gets more reps with the ones. I think you're going to see a bigger package of run game for this Michigan offense. And
my issue with that is I feel like we've kind of been saying that. It's like, well, we said it when you.
Well, this was the first game Alex Orji started. So I mean, and we saw some of that in the first half.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess. I love that. Unbelievable. I'll take Michigan covering the 12.5 points.
I'm not like, I think if you watch the Minnesota Iowa game, that game was much closer. Again, they let it get away from them. They gave up some big runs.
Is that not how Michigan wins? Is that not how Michigan wins? Michigan wins in the second half. Book it, 12.5 points. Absolutely love it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.